All right, what's up, fuckers? Anyway, I figured I'd make a video on the latest real estate numbers from Redfin. This is their weekly data series. It runs through February 23rd. It came out today. It's for all property types, so they don't make a distinction for stuff like single family condos and what have you. But it's more timely than their monthly data series, so it's worth looking at just to sort of get a feel for kind of where we're heading. And so I'll explain this visual. At the top is active listings on the left hand y axis, homes sold on the right hand y axis, just to show the correlation between those two. So, in other words, the top chart drives the bottom chart. When home sales are low, which they are now, you have a demand problem. And eventually, what that does is it uh, causes something like active listings to trend higher. And as active listings sort of accumulate, that in theory is going to put downward pressure on home prices. And so what we're noticing really at like an aggregate level is that home price appreciation growth is slowing. It hasn't outright rolled over. It has in some markets, but not really at an aggregate level. And so, Redfin, I want to say they track like 400 metros, give or take. So, yeah, this is just an aggregate look. And by the way, there's no moving average applied to this. These are just the straight up raw weekly numbers. Oftentimes, what they do is they present this as a 4 week average. It's just a tad easier to see what is actually happening. And we can even expand that and look at a 12 week. All we're doing is just smoothing it out that much more. So, look, I'll just click through some of these and just give you my thoughts. Albany, New York, what you're seeing oftentimes in these stronger markets that are really in the Northeast for now is that uh, active listings are still low. But as you can see, home sales are still quite low. Um, Eventually, what's going to happen, and what you're seeing really in places like Albany, Rochester, and other parts of the country, there's a very high number of like investors in these markets, and so they're just doing their thing. They're trying to squeeze out every last drop that they can and try to you know basically screw people over, and they are succeeding at that. That's what this system creates. So and quite frankly rewards. Here's Asheville, North Carolina. As you can see, active listings cratered around COVID. Now it's sort of snaking its way higher. No different here. There's a lot of second homes in a place like Asheville, and you'll see that in markets where there are a lot of vacant properties. So again, this is just something like active listings, obviously for sale. In theory, it only represents something like owner occupied homes, and if you look at the entire housing stock for any market, it's a very small percentage of the whole thing, the entire housing stock. Owner occupied, renter occupied, vacant, and the status can change between those. Property can go from vacant to owner occupied, renter occupied, to owner occupied. I mean, hell, I've seen you know properties around town where they've got both a for sale and for rent side up front just because the owner can't figure out what the fuck to do with it. But hey, here we are, man. It only gets dumber from here. So okay, here's Cincinnati, Midwest market. What do you notice? Yep. Now active listings are moving higher. So much hand holding this cycle. It's annoying. People are just all these investors are just hiding right now. It's going to take them realizing that something like the labor market is undeniably weak, and all they're looking at oftentimes is like the unemployment rate as their signal for that. When most of the time, I, I have found that the majority of people have no idea what that even means, how mechanical it is, and if you're just looking at that in isolation, how in the hell do you know where it's going to go from here? Don't you have to look at something like the quality of job growth, how job growth looks across various industries in these particular markets? Of course you do. But people don't want to fucking do that because they're lazy. And that's really what the system rewards. So, look, Cleveland, Ohio is no different. It's relatively, again, relatively more affordable. It's still unaffordable from a historical standpoint. But again, these investors are just coming in here and just trying to squeeze out every little last drop that they possibly can because that's what we do. We support the wealth effect at all costs, right? Because for a lot of households, their biggest asset is their home. Not all households, but for a lot of households, it is their biggest asset. So we will do everything to support those values, even if it means rewarding speculative behavior. And that's what we're dealing with now. Here's Dallas. Oftentimes, I would just say Texas and Florida. People are like, well, oh, there's only excess supply over there because maybe they built too much. You know what? It doesn't fucking matter if some of these markets are building or not, right? Because the structural housing stock, right? Households, the population, all of those things trend together. I mean, why in the hell would you build like a bunch of new communities, say in a place like Detroit, when the population has been declining really for decades? So people will latch on to any narrative that they possibly can to justify, really their perception of reality, which is based on a hunch. People are just so exceptionally full of shit, and they refuse to look in the mirror as if they're not, in any way contributing to this problem, when in fact that they are. Uh, Yeah, I mean, it's just so dumb. People were talking about how Huntsville is going to be this really strong market, and it's just not. These local incomes look like dog shit. Labor market is weakening significantly, and people just can't really see it yet because they're not paying attention to the details. Um, that's going to be a problem. Knoxville, look, active listings bottom, it's moving higher, but this one has a long way to go from a historical standpoint. I still do expect that, you know, just like any other market, Knoxville is not immune to really the economic cycle. Something like unemployment. All of a sudden, you're going to see properties popping up left and right, and people start, losing their jobs, and they are. There's LA. Look at that. I mean, that's basically, what do you call that? Palisades. Look at the list price. This is a 4 week average. I'll show the 1 week just to show just how absurd this is. That's just sad. I mean, I don't know. I can't fully explain that move down in active listings. I wish I could. Um, but I have to imagine that's very closely tied to the Palisades fires. Uh, People are probably just trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's my hometown of Nashville. I just want to make a point again. Um, Active listings. Now, this is for the entire metro, but I'll just talk about Davidson County to just put some hard numbers around it. Uh, we'll call it like roughly 3,800 homes, give or take, or that's the number of listings for sale right now in a place like Davidson County. Yet there are over 370,000 total homes. So if you're just looking at something like active listings or inventory for sale in isolation and you think it can't go higher just based on looking at that, then you are missing the forest for the trees. It's time to go back to school, man. That's some god awful accounting. But anyway, yeah, we built a lot. Our population isn't growing. On top of that, our population is just younger. That is going to be a problem for home price appreciation. Here's New York. I mean, what a shit show this is. Do I need to even say that there are a truckload of investors in this market? Of course there are. I mean, that's really where the parasites come from. So here's Phoenix. Yeah, look at that. Look at the move in active listings, and you better believe there's a shit ton of investors in this market. In fact, that's where oftentimes like the blueprint for a lot of this behavior, came from. I mean, Place like Phoenix, it was kind of like the pilot program for all this speculation. Here's Vegas. Obviously, Vegas got run over last cycle. What I will say about a place like Vegas is that really poor incomes in a place like Vegas. Roughly 25% of jobs are in leisure and hospitality, so that would only make sense if you think about what really drives their economy. Of course, it's the casino industry. So, um, yeah, they are going to have problems as the unemployment rate continues to move higher, and it is moving noticeably higher in a place like Vegas. So, and then why don't we just point out one last market, West Coast Seattle, AI, center, central, I guess I should say. But look, I mean, what happened? Inventory or active listings cratered around COVID, and broadly speaking, it's moving higher. In fact, it would have moved higher much quicker if BTFP hadn't happened, but we just love to handhold. We don't really have anything remotely close to resembling capitalism at this point. It's just basically real estate bros and tech bros for the win. And everybody else, including basically all the boomers' kids, are just getting absolutely bent over by these high prices, despite there being more structural supply than we've ever had. And by that, I mean stuff like housing units per capita. I mean, when you look at the structural housing stock and the households themselves, you're not going to find a housing shortage. If you actually think that there's a housing shortage, you may as well say something like the internet or interstate commerce isn't real. People can't do a proper scaled analysis. Get the fuck out of here. That is so much bullshit. Anyway, let's benchmark some of these various metros. Look at a couple metrics up top: weeks of supply. And again, think of that as months of supply. It's just shown on a weekly basis because this is a weekly data series. As you can see, pretty much everywhere, it's snaking its way higher. Shocker. And then obviously median sales price year over year. So obviously, higher weeks of supply is, the year over year change in median sales price is probably just going to be lower. Um, Really, everything bounced around BTFP. I'm sick and tired of seeing that show up in pretty much every data series that you look at. So, some of these markets are stronger than the aggregate figure, which is all Redfin metros. Some are weaker. It just really depends. Um, but yeah, this is just giving you more context. But everything moves together. I mean, for crying out loud, this whole thing is just, we're in this post QE world where the entire thing relies on liquidity. I don't really know why that's so hard for people to understand. This whole thing is just unwinding at varying rates of change. It's not hard, right? I'm showing a variety of different markets that are are not just in, say, Texas or Florida, but all over the place. You're just seeing it unwind at varying rates because there are market specific dynamics causing that to sort of happen at different sort of like rates. Is that really that hard to wrap your head around? And it's not outlandish at all. That's how this works. So again, a couple more markets. These are oftentimes some of the stronger ones. I would say Rochester, New York, it has to be one of the strongest, if not the strongest markets. But again, broadly softening, broadly softening. So leading days on market still quite low there, but um, it does seem to be sort of slowly moving higher. So look, I'll stop there. But again, there's no housing shortage. We have an allocation problem. Is it possible that it's just temporary? Just let that sink in before you take a statement or anything I've said personally. That's what the math shows. If you say not in my market, you are basically admitting that you're a moron. I'm sick and tired of listening to people run their mouth about shit they don't understand because they had a feeling. That is the dumbest way to approach where we are in this cycle. But hey, people will still do it, including Dave Ramsey.